So, as the cliche goes, do you got skills? Developing your leadership skills and communication skills will go a long way towards helping you become an effective leader, whether you're leading from the top or the bottom. We've looked at leadership as a trait, styles of leaderships, and tasks and relationship components of leadership. Now we're going to look at the leadership and leadership communication skills critical for success. For Chapter 5, you'll need to understand different types of skills, subsets, and how those can make you more effective. Be sure to note that this lecture covers interpersonal skills that aren't in the book. Until more recently, leadership is focused on traits, and you might have found a few of those kind of funny when we went through them in the earlier chapters. Since 2000, yeah, that's changed. We've seen a focus and shift from traits to skills. Why? Unlike traits, skills can be developed. The skills approach represents a shift in thinking from a focus on personality traits, or traits that we often view as fixed and inherent, to an emphasis on skills and abilities, which can be learned and developed. Skills are what leaders can accomplish, whereas traits are who leaders are. And, as you saw in the early chapters, can be a little problematic. Thus, skill building is a major focus in leadership and training classes. For example, Harvard Business School offers an entirely skill-focused leadership training program that you could register to take if you wanted. I'll repeat a lot of our class. So if you're wondering what makes a leader effective, you're on the right track. Researchers who study the skills approach to leadership are looking to answer just that question. From this research, they want to be able to tell future leaders how to increase their chances of success. Here you see 3 categories you'll need to know about leadership skills. The foundational approach for leadership skills says effective leaders have all 3 areas. Administrative, working with things. Interpersonal skills, working with people. Conceptual skills, working with ideas. So now we're going to look at the skill sets in more detail. Now this is probably not going to sound glamorous, but administrative skills play a primary role. The book explains, quote, administrative skills refer to those competencies a leader needs to run an organization in order to carry out the organization's purposes and goals, unquote. To switch to the dark side, maybe you could think of a manager who had a great vision for improving a new product line or even just improving a routine process at work. But that person had no concept of scheduling, budgeting, assigning tasks. They drop in. So this is that bad manager drops in, say, get it done, and drops out. Good luck adding that to your current workload. If you've ever had to ask, when do I do this task? That means you have a leader who's probably lacking just a little bit in administrative skills. They are so important. Another way people talk about these is the ability to work with things or technical skills, which I know is a little different than you're used to hearing. But here's an example. Think of how in an accounting firm, technical skills could include what you've learned in classes when you're doing an audit. It's hands-on, there's a product, it's important. Now, if you reach CEO one day, you're probably not going to flex that muscle that you would need to, say, organize a spreadsheet. You'll depend on people who do, but you need to understand, how to assign those to people and how long they might take. Here are 3 of those technical skills. First off, managing people means, another way we put this, quote, management by walking around, unquote. I love that. So think of a manager who would get involved or help employees work as a team. So I knew a sales director who would step in for her administrative assistant to give that person a lunch break. So actions like that motivate employees to do their best and promote satisfaction. Administrative skills include responsiveness too. This skill set includes being able to handle and prioritize urgent staff matters quickly and effectively. At a C-suite level, this could include communicating with the board of directors about a crisis, communicating with the planning and zoning board about what's needed to move a project forward, or communicating with investors about next steps that are being taken to improve the functions of your company. So now are you wondering, that sounds a little interpersonal? Now, this is about accomplishing tasks through people. I know that's really different, but you're not usually communicating with a planning and zoning board for fun. A good leader understands how a team is working and is involved with what is going on so they can meet their goals. They're talking to different stakeholders and communicating with them effectively to support the goals of the organization to get stuff done. In fact, some versions of the way business communication are taught is entirely on that level, where it's a communication as an administrative skill because your whole point of communicating is to accomplish tasks. We will go into why that's not entirely true, but there are some places that take that approach to communication. Right. Second, managing resources. So this is called in the book the lifeblood of an organization: people, money, supplies, equipment, anything you need to operate. So if you're in a public or private organization, it doesn't matter where you are, you're going to have some of this. It could be something simple like you need to get a new whiteboard for a conference room after you get a response or after you respond to your team's request for one. You'll need to manage money, supplies, space, funds, maintenance funds, new staff, somebody to maybe give away the old equipment to, or another way to dispose it if it's broken. So a leader doesn't just know what they need, but they're also skilled at getting it. This could be through ordering inventory, negotiating with other departments for more equipment or space, or just telling people what to do in the right order. It is getting things done so the people who follow you are effective. And last one, technical competence. This is specialized knowledge that we started on with the example of the auditor. Specialized knowledge. It can be understanding how an organization works. It's sometimes why the best promotions are actually internal, because people already know the place, they know how to communicate with those people. You'll also see this called functional competence in the book. Think about your major. You've already been trained in technical skills so that when you enter the workplace, you can understand the basics of what's going on. As you learn more about the company, how the organization functions, and what's required in your department, you'll develop that competence more and more. This might sound a little more glamorous to some of you. Perhaps other of you would like to go back to the auditing skills, but these are really important. Don't disparage them. Research has pointed out how important they are. So these are people skills, the abilities to help a leader to work effectively with followers, peers, superiors. And again, it is to accomplish organizational goals. It's not about just going to have fun. It is about developing relationships to meet goals and part of understanding people and the social systems. It helps people work with people to solve problems. So let's go a little beyond our book and think about this in more depth. First, let's talk about a concept called perspective taking, or understanding the attitudes others have towards a matter. You're sensitive and empathetic to others' perspectives and goals. This is the kind of leader who's able to understand others' point of view on different issues. They'll get people who have different views of problems and solutions. Sound like empathy a little? Well, it's different. Empathy is about feelings. Perspective taking is about cognition and seeing another viewpoint. More like social intelligence, where a person is able to understand people, the social fabric of the organization, and how things are connected. Big benefit here. It's been found to decrease prejudice and stereotyping. An experiment found that when people were asked to describe an African American man in a photograph, they'd say things like musical, athletic, so these negative stereotypes like aggressive and forgetful. I mean, if you're thinking that sounds kind of racist, yeah. But when people were asked to write a day in a life essay about the man in the photograph, they attributed fewer stereotypical traits. In fact, it was overall, people less racist is my interpretation of the study. Here's an example in the workplace. You get an email from a support person at 1 a.m. with a memo draft and apology for it being messy. You can jump to lots of different stereotypes there, but if you pause and consider what that person's day might have been, you're probably going to communicate a more effective reply, even if it's, hey, please don't work at 1 in the morning. This can help in negotiations too, so you can think about what the opponent wants, and in teams you can get to deeper thinking. Here's an example. A leader could use perspective taking by listing stakeholders and the impact of a decision like downsizing. Pausing to think categorically about outcomes can support better choices. Second, let's look at being socially perceptive. The book explains this, quote, is having insight into and awareness of what is important to others, how they are motivated, the problems they face, and how they react to change, unquote. The book gives the example of changing the location of a graduation ceremony, and I'm going to guess some of you have experienced that with COVID, where things were moved. Maybe that you were in high school or maybe you're in college at that point. In fact, I'll even use my high school. So if y'all are from the Dallas area, I grew up in Arlington and I went to or graduated from Martin High School. So when I was there in the 90s, they used a Native American warrior and they'd been using that since 1982. It was a Native American tribal chieftain hat. It was not particularly accurate. And as you know, those things are being phased out because people understand it's not particularly nice. It's a little racist. So in 2020, the principal announced the discontinuation of that mascot. Alumni were upset. This is the kind of thing where they put it on t-shirts. We had little car hanging things. Now I look back and I can't believe it. But that was the 90s, and the administration really did not seem prepared at all for the response from the alumni. I was speaking on my behalf, but generally we as alumni are not particularly spirited or involved. And there were alumni who were furious, and they were all over social media complaining. I could not believe seeing people I graduated with in 1998 arguing with current high schoolers, and these current high schoolers being so much more accurate about why it was problematic. So it was really funny now, but also terrible. So with that principle, that leader needed to understand, that principal needed to understand that symbols, buy-in, response, all of that matters. And this is why places run focus groups or have committees to give input. So an alumni committee would have made so much more sense, where different perspectives could have been brought in from different people who are socially perceptive. Now, none of that really works unless you also understand behavioral flexibility. It's not enough to understand how people might react. It's also about changing and adapting one's behavior in light of that potential reaction. A flexible leader isn't locked into one approach, but is willing to change to meet their followers' needs. Sticking with the example of my high school mascot, I'm not suggesting that principal should have reacted to alumni and changed the decision. I am suggesting that if that principal had had an alumni committee, those people could have been more socially perceptive, so that those people then could have been used to adapt to the reaction on behalf of the high school and that principal, and encourage people's willingness to change. There was no encouraging of the willingness to change. People were just told, well, it's changing. All right, so let's talk next about showing emotional intelligence. The book explains this is understanding your own emotions and others and applying them to tasks. So again, we're not going into anything that touchy and feely. This is still about getting stuff done. A good leader knows their own emotions, has empathy, can regulate emotions. Now, this is cultural, but you can probably imagine a leader expressing sadness by wiping an eye during a difficult moment. Now try to imagine that leader, and I know I'm being super American right now, but imagine that leader sobbing and wailing. It just would not be done in our American setting, because that leader would be expected to regulate emotions. The leader would regulate those emotions knowing that doing so could be helpful to the people around them. People who are more sensitive to their emotions and the impact of their emotions on others will be more effective. You might think about this as being a thermostat, not a thermometer. Probably the easiest way to remember it. A thermostat reads the room, so it reads the emotions in the room, reads the temperature, and adjusts accordingly to make the room more comfortable. A thermometer measures the temperature, but just gives a reading. So what if you're a team lead, pushing your team to wrap a project on a Friday night, got to get out for the weekend, and you notice people are expressing stress and tension? As a lead, you can notice that. That's being a thermometer, or you can be a thermostat and find a way to change the dynamic and the mood. Maybe offering verbal encouragement, maybe ordering dinner, maybe saying, hey, if you need to go home and then come back. I mean, just something to help to meet the needs of the team. And finally, on our deep dive into interpersonal skills, let's look at conflict. We come back to this in depth in Chapter 11 with more communication applications. But one thing I want you to know now is that conflict creates the need for change and often occurs as the result of change. I love that line. That's actually in the book. There are whole books on this topic. In this class, we're going to define conflict as, quote, a struggle between two or more individuals over perceived differences regarding substantive issues, or over perceived differences regarding relational issues. I know that's a mouthful, unquote. So your book mentions that leaders and followers can feel uncomfortable, but you'll probably also find you work with people who thrive on conflict and change. This is a complicated topic. This is one where people's almost polarization on it, I feel like, can create more conflict just because people define conflict differently. So let's review this section on interpersonal skills. They are about being sensitive to how your perspectives fit with others. Can you understand emotions? Can you understand others' perspectives and feelings? Are you flexible? Can you adapt? Can you work together even if there's resistance and conflict? It's not the touchy-feely stuff that the word interpersonal can bring to mind. It's practical, day-to-day, applicable skills that can be developed. So if you see interpersonal skills and you're like, I'm an introvert, this is not me, it can be, because these are developable skills. All right, let's move on to conceptual skills. So Theodore Hesper was the former president of Notre Dame. I might be messing up his name there. But he said, I'm going to quote this, quote, "The very essence of leadership is that you have to have a vision. It's got to be a vision that you articulate clearly and forcefully on every occasion," unquote. Having a vision is part of having a good grasp on conceptual skills. The book includes problem solving, strategic planning, creating vision, explains them all in detail. Not going to repeat that. But take a minute and think about a leader with a vision. I'll say the first time I saw a Tesla, I did not think that company was going to perform well. I mean, they just didn't look like the kind of cars, I don't know, especially living in Texas right now, they just didn't look like the kind of car people would buy into. I mean, if I understood that vision, I would be so wealthy right now if I'd bought lots of stock. Here's the core idea. When you are leading, your ability to communicate about the problem, the solutions, the implementation, and the vision for success will create great buy-in and engagement. So one person I find really interesting is actually Alan Mulally, again, last name terrible there, but he was the former CEO of Boeing and then president of CEO of Ford. They asked him in an interview how he would describe his leadership style, and he said, quote, "It's important to have a compelling vision and a comprehensive plan. Positive leadership, conveying the idea that there is always a way forward, is so important because that is what you are here for, to figure out how to move the organization forward," unquote. He explains that part of that is including everyone because then it's going to be more fun. So vision can't just be top down. It has to be inclusive. It has to get people to buy in, and you have to be able to communicate clearly so that people understand it. So how do leadership skills relate to leadership styles? Let's keep up with that Ford and Boeing former CEO. Mulally held a weekly BPR meeting, BPR standing for Business Plan Review. He said he got so much energy from that, and one of his examples of energy included noting things like an upcoming vacation on a calendar. Earlier, I mentioned knowing things about personal lives of employees. That's a great example of how that can work. If you're interested in that, the interview with that CEO is actually on McKinsey's blog about strategy and corporate finance. If you Google Mulally, Mulally, it will pop up, Mulally and McKinsey anyways. So let's do a review just a little bit, and keep in mind the 3 categories of skills to levels of management. So keep this image in mind, and let's dive in and review and wrap this up. So administrative, or AKA technical skills, are the most important at lower levels of the organization where there's a focus on task completion. Top leaders like CEOs rely on skilled followers to handle technical issues. Interpersonal skills, important at every level, most important in the middle manager role because there's so much need for collaboration. Conceptual skills are important at the top level. So that's why I mentioned all the CEOs and presidents of universities. That's where the strategic decisions are made. When top leaders don't have those skills, they can jeopardize the entire organization. Originally, this conceptualization of skills and leadership levels actually came in 1955, but in 2007, they had a study that, email me, I'll send you the link. They reinforced this by looking at skills needed at different leadership levels. So this study looked at the skills of 1,000 managers and found that interpersonal and cognitive or administrative skills were more required than strategic skills and lower levels of organizational leadership. But as one rose in the leadership ranks, the execution of higher levels of skills were needed. So I know this is a little conflicting sounding with the idea of being less technical on the top, but I would sort of suggest here, it never hurts to have technical skills, but top leaders tend to use other skills more because of their roles. I work right now for a dean, Sean Albers, who is amazing with his background in technical skills. So it's just so nice to work for someone who knows what they're asking when they ask you to redo a report or to reformat or redo your formulas on a spreadsheet. He's not doing that. He's having other people run those reports, but he knows what they mean. He knows how to explain it. He knows how to set the vision for what's going to be done. All right, so a leader needs administrative, interpersonal, and conceptual skills. How do you build those? Well, career experiences, and for you right now, internship experiences. Leaders are going to develop skills over time, and career experience is going to help this. That's not the only way you can develop these. You can learn through challenging assignments, through mentoring relationships, seeking out training, gaining hands-on experience. Earlier, I mentioned that Harvard Business School leadership course. There are lots of things that are available online that are both free and paid. The Harvard Business School one does a lot of self-assessment and uses case studies. So I think it would replicate a lot of what's already in this class. But I mean, things like that are out there, and there's a lot of opportunities for you to think about how do I develop whatever area you could see yourself lacking in. So in conclusion, you learn more problem-solving skills the more you encounter problems. So don't be afraid of that conflict and the difficulty. The higher you rise in an organization, the more complex and long-term those problems can be, and you will learn through experience how to address them, how to communicate about them. You'll rely on past experiences, past knowledge, and advice from others to sharpen those skills, and again, just become a better leader and communicator. We covered a lot in this lecture. Big takeaway: you need to know your skills to develop your skills and how to communicate with other people.